All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Deborah Pickett, and it's my pleasure to welcome everybody to this afternoon's webinar on behalf of the Belonging Project and my own company, Page 2 Communications. For those who may not be familiar with the Belonging Project, this is a national effort to support and build community among diverse attorneys and law students as well, and their allies to combat the impact of the COVID-19 crisis and its economic fallout on diversity in a profession, to learn some of the lessons of the 2008 recession and its incredible and continuing negative impact on diversity and inclusion across the legal space, and hopefully avoid those consequences this time around. I'm thrilled to have my business, Page 2 Communications, as a national partner to this effort. There are numerous esteemed partners, law firms, and other companies and individuals who are part of this, and we're all really teaming together to provide resources and tools to support personal and professional development among diverse attorneys, law students, and legal talent. So I'm really pleased to be here and to do what we can in this effort. Page 2 Communications is a boutique PR firm that serves law firms and lawyers exclusively. So we are often on the other side of what we're talking about today, which is to say that we advise our clients, mainly large and mid-sized law firms, on how to promote their attorneys and the firms and their brands themselves. We don't often have the opportunity to provide coaching and support to attorneys on an individual level or to talk about self-promotion, but that's very much a part of the conversation that we're trying to have with our clients now, to really nudge them in the right direction of providing additional PR support and visibility, particularly for diverse folks among the legal talent they have already. So let's jump into the content, and we'll have some time, hopefully, for questions and some interaction towards the end. Again, my name is Deborah Pickett. I'm the founder and principal consultant at Page 2. I'm a journalist by background, but have covered legal issues in the legal space for much of my journalism career, and then have switched sides and become a strategic advisor to attorneys and firms for about the last 10 years. So our agenda today, we're going to talk just very briefly an overview of the challenge that we face around representation and visibility for diverse attorneys going into this, and briefly touch on some of those lessons that I mentioned about the fallout from the 2008 recession. And we'll talk about a little bit of what's driving some of this. And then we're going to talk really, our primary focus is on self-promotion, on promoting your own visibility, and how you can do that in service of advancing and continuing your career despite the difficult circumstances in which we all find ourselves. And our primary tools for doing that will be the tools of strategic communication. So we'll talk about identifying audiences, crafting messages, and then matching those messages to the right media in order to reach the desired audiences. So very briefly, the challenge that we face, the existing gaps in wages and opportunities for diverse attorneys. Now we know, following the law firm layoffs in 2008, that overall representation of women and minorities in the legal profession declined sharply and has barely come back. And we know that whatever we may be facing in terms of economic fallout from the current crisis, we are certainly looking at something on a similar scale for the industry as a whole as we were in 2008. So given that we know this next recession could in fact cost as many as 10,000 lawyers their jobs, and we see how difficult it's been to bounce back from that. So we are obviously looking to avoid that in the future. The years up until 2008 had been relatively good ones in terms at least of the pace of progress, if not the overall size. But then we know, even before the current crisis, that we've seen something of a stagnation in terms of that growth. And we're seeing not only a lack of growth, but we're also seeing a steady stream of departures from large law firms in particular, but from the profession in general among diverse folks. And we know, of course, that when we look at the top tier of the profession, those managing partner and law firm leadership, practice leadership jobs, we see that diversity just seems to shrink all along that path to the top. The representation is never what it should be at any point along the pipeline, but it continues to fall off disproportionately on the path to the top. So that when we get to the firm leadership level, we are talking about the least diverse tier of folks within the industry. So we know that opportunities for growth and advancement within the profession have been limited and have presented real challenges. We also know, though, that in terms of wages and compensation, whether that's a salaried compensation for associates or overall draw and partnership share at the partnership level, the recession certainly 10 years ago dramatically affected lawyers' income. And that has been slow to bounce back overall as well. But interestingly, as that overall growth has slowed, the disparities there, or the racial gap in particular, has narrowed somewhat. And that's really due in large part to the trend towards more transparency and more objectivity, more clear measures, clearly communicated measures in how law firm compensation models are built. So that's an area that is to the good in the sense that we are at least starting to see how the system works. And once we know what the rules are and they're communicated clearly and consistently across folks, we are seeing that is a system in which at least there seems to be some more equity. Of course, a gender-based wage gap still exists in quite dramatic fashion, as noted here. And that is persistent and pernicious across all areas of practice, all sizes of firms. It really, that one has been sticky from even prior to the last recession to the current moment where we see ourselves. And the biggest factor is not only starting from a lower point, but consistently throughout their careers, we see women lawyers in particular have their work billed out at lower rates than men. And so obviously, if you're billing out work at lower rates, when your compensation is tied to that, we're going to see that gap reflected. And of course, there certainly is a racial element to this because when we look at these numbers through an intersectional lens, we see that one, in terms of just sheer representation, minority women continue to be the most dramatically underrepresented group at the partnership level. And from what we can see in aggregate, at least, if women lawyers as a total group are being paid less than men, then Black women lawyers in particular are paying an even bigger price and getting paid even less. They're also coming into the profession, and I know we have some students in the group who are coming into the profession carrying the highest debt loads on average, even from their undergraduate degree. So starting out behind and then not making as much money throughout. So we can see all these numbers and we can see the limitations on opportunities, the gaps in total compensation, and none of this is mysterious. We know what it's tied to. At the associate level, certainly, it's tied to billable hours. And at the partnership level, it's tied to origination credit. And there's really a cycle there that drives both access to promotions up the career path, as well as compensation, particularly when you get to the partnership level and your compensation is tied to the amount of new business that you originate. And, what we see in these cycles is that, it's those key entry points. So getting work assignments, getting enough work to meet billable hour goals to begin with, but then also getting the kind of visible and challenging and skill developing work that advances you along a career path, that's something that is dependent often on individual and supervisory relationships within the law firm setting. And though that is certainly most dramatically true for associates at the start of their careers, it continues to be true throughout. It's a cycle, as this graphic indicates, that the better work assignment you get, and the better you do on it, the better reviews you get, the more opportunities you then are offered to be involved in things like being on pitches and RFP responses and developing new business, then the more opportunity you have to potentially win some credit for originating new business and developing the kind of relationships that establish your own value and put you on the path to partnership, and then generate that revenue for you that that results in the high compensation that we see for partners. But the inputs there are very much dependent on being visible and recognized from senior leaders and from senior partners within the law firm setting as someone who is ready, willing, available, and competent to do the work that they have to assign. And it's that visibility that is really the continuing challenge. And so one of the first real substantial studies that focused particularly on women of color in the profession was the 2005 study from the American Bar Association, Visible Invisibility. And, that title still resonates today because the same incredible underrepresentation within the profession still exists, and the same drivers that limit opportunities for promotion and compensation still exist, and that's being excluded from networking opportunities. Nearly 2/3 of women of color in the profession saying that they felt that they had been particularly excluded from networking opportunities within and outside their firms. 44%, coming close to half of women of color in this survey, saying that they'd been denied desirable assignments to gain experience within their firms. And then, of course, as a logical consequence of this, nearly everyone surveyed in this look at women of color working in the profession said it was harder to meet billable hour requirements and build their own books of business toward partnership because they didn't have access to the kinds of opportunities within the firm and externally to potential clients that would allow them to do so. Now, this is 15 years ago, but the follow-up study just come out in 2020, entitled aptly Left Out and Left Behind, really talks about some of the very same dynamics that women of color continue to feel invisible and unsupported in the legal profession. And so for me, as a former journalist, now a PR person, it was frustrating and disheartening to read this, but it also felt like, well, there's part of this that is a problem that I can help solve. I am certainly involved in my role as a communications sort of consigliere to law firm leaders in helping them work through some of the systemic issues here. But as a PR person, I also have a decent sense of what are some individual responses within the system that certainly needs to change that can help us cope and succeed within the current climate. And so that's our focus today, is really that notion of, well, if the problem somehow is still visibility, how can we as individuals and the responsibility that we're taking to develop ourselves personally and professionally, how can we respond to this systemic issue and this culture that wants to sort of make us invisible, right? How can we make it impossible for them not to see us? And that requires a certain mindset shift. There is, I think, one of the things that struck me in reading Michelle Obama's book, for example, and her account of being a law firm associate. I know I'm probably the only person who read the law firm stuff as the most interesting part of her biography, but she was talking about sort of her mindset as a young lawyer, and I think this is very true for associates, particularly in the largest global firms, that you don't get to those places without having a certain mindset of being kind of a rule follower and a box checker, and someone who just is smart enough and feels like, gosh, if I do good work, and I do everything that I'm supposed to do, then the idea is that I should succeed within this system. And we have a very well-established traditional playbook for what that success is supposed to look like. That you find a mentor within the firm who will help you get the assignments that you need and make the external and internal introductions that you need in order to be successful. And that if you kind of play your part and fit into the firm culture and wait your turn, that you'll be rewarded for that. And unfortunately, in all the statistics that I ran through quickly at the top here, we're seeing that just doesn't work. And so a shift to a more entrepreneurial mindset can be helpful to work within that broken system, to find a way to make it work for you. And so taking the opportunity to set personal goals that may or may not, frankly, be in alignment with exactly the goals and strategy of the firm, or what the firm has in mind for you, is a really important first step. And finding sponsors for your professional success who may be inside the firm, but who may also be outside the firm, who may be certainly contacts at external clients if you're working with them, but also allies in various places, whether you're involved in professional organizations, alumni organizations, and even outside groups like this project, and some of the work being done in various communities. If there are people who are willing to be coaches and mentors and sponsors for you, and be looking out for you, then those are the allies that you want. And you need to have a little bit of sort of trusting your own gut on who has your interests in mind. And those people may not always be the people within the firm. And so part of that entrepreneurial mindset is a certain flexibility, a readiness or a willingness to move on and change things if necessary if they're not working. So that, kind of waiting your turn is not always going to be the thing that works in a system that seems, quite frankly, rigged not to always give you your turn. So what does that entrepreneurial mindset look like? Well, that's the big question that you really need to wrestle with on an individual level. What does success look like for you? What are your terms in terms of setting those personal goals? And certainly if it's ascending, to the top of the law firm hierarchy, then there's a path or a playbook for doing that. But if it's not that, or if there are other things, it's worth being honest with yourself about what those terms are. As you set those goals, you can certainly think about the sort of multitude of career paths within the legal industry. There's certainly the well-trod path from firm lawyer to in-house lawyer, and looking at general counsel opportunities and in-house lawyer opportunities across the business world. But, there are certainly many other ways to use the incredibly valuable skills that you have. Find those external role models and sponsors and, think truly about what they have to offer and what you can emulate, what you can learn from them. And also think about what you need in terms of allies. I mean, are there particular areas that you need to develop that you're looking for someone who can help really shape your strengths? Listen to your instincts. We talked a little bit about that, and just, are you being supported where you are? If you do that gut check and success just feels impossible in the context that you're in, interrogate why. If it feels untenable and you've got that feeling about it, then that may be something that you need to act on. With that in mind, the faster exit might be the smarter one, rather than investing many years trying to hit something that doesn't seem like it's the thing that ultimately is going to work out. So having made those decisions about what your goals truly are, then you're ready to really begin the work of self-promotion, of really creating and communicating the vision that you have of your success. Now, as I mentioned, I come at this from the perspective of someone who does public relations and media work on a firm basis. So I take a strategic approach to this. And the basic framework of a communication strategy is that you have a message that you want to get to an audience, and the way to get that message out to the audience in the way that they're ready to receive it and that it's credible for them is through media. And so, even though that diagram goes left to right, starting with message, in fact, in our strategic work, we work with firms, particularly when we have a real business development focus, we start from the other side. We start from that audience side. And that's something that you can do on an individual basis as well. Who are your clients or potential clients? So, who buys your services, who's getting what you're selling? But also importantly, who refers business to you? And particularly important are those internal audiences as well, especially for those who are earlier in their careers. Who's evaluating your work? Who's influencing your pay? Those are audiences that you need to be communicating with, and not just during an annual review process, but on a continual basis. So, those audiences for most of you, probably break out into three primary groups. They're external clients and potential clients, certainly. They're firm leaders, whether they're practice group leaders, office leaders, or firm-wide leaders, the folks making the big pay and promotion decisions. And then there are also sort of a broad group that I'll call peers that are either attorneys at other firms or other professionals who are part of what can be a referral network, but certainly also a kind of professional support group. And those are really your three sort of big key types of folks in your audiences. And you can think about how they break down, certainly in terms of their specific interests. There are probably different types of clients that you may have across different industries, as well as leaders at different levels within your firm. But as we think about those audiences then, we think about what messages do you want them to hear? Who needs to see you? If we go back again to this notion that the problem is this invisibility, for want of a better term, then who needs to be seeing you? And what do they need to know about you? That's what you want to communicate to these key audiences. So an exercise that we do often from a brand perspective, but that works really well from a personal perspective too, is the exercise of making a word cloud. And there's lots of free services online that'll do this for you. Wordclouds.com is one, but you can also Google the term and find plenty of others. Start out by very intentionally taking a few minutes to think about words that you would like to have describing you, how you would like to be seen, how you'd like to be known, how you would be described in a professional context, and really write them down and think about them. And then take that document and paste some of it, and you can grab some of it from your professional bio if you have one on a firm website, from your own LinkedIn page if you've spent time on language there, any other articles or cover letters or anything that you've written where you have described yourself and you've used some of these words. Grab a bunch of that. You can, and here's where cut and paste is our friend, and throw that into one of these word cloud generators and see what it comes up with. It's going to come up with a graphic representation of those words that you think are important in describing you. And when you take a look at that word cloud, think about, do the words that are in your LinkedIn profile or on your firm bio, do they match those words and those descriptors that were in your head? So is the message that's being broadcast about you, is it the one that you would want? Or do you need to spend some time in thinking about that language? Are you really describing yourself in the way that you want to be described? And now whether you have, there are some things obviously that you have a lot of control over, like your LinkedIn profile. You can go and change any words or descriptions on that very easily. Now, if you're with a firm, obviously making changes to your firm bio is going to be something that there's a process with. You're going to have to go through your firm's marketing department or to some other resource to make that happen. But doing a check on it and doing a check on it from this perspective of what do I want other people to know about me and to think about me and to say about me, and are those words reflected here, is a really important check. Now, we called this webinar Shameless, the Art of Self-Promotion. And the pithy subtitle that we attached to it was Quantify Your Value Without Being Arrogant, a Humblebragger, or a suck-up. And of course, those are the very negative things that pop into our mind when we think about this idea of being a self-promoter. A lot of us have a really hard time tooting our own horn. And while we are very happy whenever we can to be generous in promoting others, and speaking about the strengths of others, we've really struggled with how to do it for ourselves and how to do it with sincerity and honesty. And, you know, that is doubly true for folks from underrepresented groups in the legal profession. And so, you know, it's why we consistently hear from women in the profession, from people of color in the profession, about the challenges they face with this. Excuse me. You know, there are additional burdens that folks are bearing, certainly trying to work in the culture of law firms. And there's just the additional work of when you are made invisible or made to feel invisible, just how much harder and longer you have to work to get noticed, and the pressure that you may feel, and that is quite real, to be flawless, because if you make a mistake, it's just going to play into stereotypical assumptions, or just, you know, give people an excuse not to like you or lean on you or promote you. So this feels like hard, dangerous work, but it is really necessary work. And shamelessness is the first step in it. We really need to own the qualifications and the strengths that we bring, and to be clear about them, just as we would be clear about them on behalf of someone else, precisely because of all the barriers that are put in front of folks. That if the situation in which you find yourself is one in which you are feeling invisible, then you have to make it impossible for them not to see you. And it's unfair to have to bear that burden, absolutely. But it is the classic problem that women characterize as, you know, Ginger Rogers doing everything like Fred Astaire, only backwards and in high heels. It is harder. It is absolutely harder to do when you're a member of an underrepresented group in the profession. But it's what we have to do in this environment. And so the tool that we recommend to really promote yourself and build your own visibility is creating a personal communication plan. So taking that principle of strategic communication that we talked about, where you identify who your audiences are, who needs to know what about you, identify the messages that you want to send them, and then think about the best way to communicate those messages. What's the media that's going to get that message to that audience? And this is media strategy 101. So think again about that question of audience. And you're going to want to do this exercise and answer these questions for each of the potential audiences that you thought about. So this is clients and potential clients. This is firm leaders who control promotions and pay. And then this is also outside peers who can be referral sources or sources potentially of lateral opportunities. Think about the people in that audience. What's their media diet? And by that, we simply mean, how do they get their information? So it's certainly not just reading the newspaper anymore, if it ever was. It's certainly about the things that we traditionally think of as media. A lot of NPR listeners out there among law firm leadership for sure. But also, what social media do they use? What do they refer to in conversation? I mean, when they talk about something that they've heard or just learned, where are they getting that information? What apps do they recommend that people use and have on their phones? What kinds of stuff do they keep on their desk or in their office? Maybe you don't have an opportunity to see that in person, but you can see what's behind them on their Zoom background. What do they share when they send you something, hey, take a look at this, listen to this, have you heard this podcast? Have you read this article? Who is influential to them in their thinking? Whose opinions do they most value? That's their media diet. That's a way to think about the sources that they trust. We break media down into 4 primary types of channels. Earned media in a firm context is the kind of stuff that you think of as traditional media, right? So a story about you or your firm in Clean Chicago Business or in the New York Times. Paid media, traditionally advertising, though obviously that takes many forms, digitally as well as in more traditional other kinds of advertising and commercials. Owned media, so that in the law firm context is a law firm website, as well as law firm channels like blogs, newsletters, and things like that. And then shared media, primarily social. And so how do law firms engage each of these channels at the level of sending messages about the firm's capacity as a whole? And certainly it's individual lawyers who are doing a lot of this work. Certainly they're booking speaking engagements, being on panels at conferences, mostly webinars like this. They're placing ads. They're doing sponsored content, and you see a lot of this, a lot of these kinds of opportunities, so-called advertorials, where you write something that looks like a piece of editorial content, but is paid placement. More traditional firm content, the tons of e-blasts that firms were sending out a few months ago to advertise their new COVID-specific webpage channels and the million webinars that they were offering to their clients. PR and publicity, so whether that's folks doing media interviews, as we might think about first, but also pitching stories to reporters on particular trends that they may be seeing among their clients, placing opinion pieces, placing thought leadership articles, and all kinds of submitted content across industry journals. I mean, the expert analysis pieces that you see in Law 360, for example, and Insights and Bloomberg and all those kind of contributed columns. Also, awards, and that's a really big category of promotion for law firms. The million different award opportunities that lawyers and firms can put themselves forward for. Nationally, all of the big publishing companies, whether it's Law 360, American Lawyer, National Law Journal, all of those have their various award programs, Practice Group of the Year, Rising Stars, Trailblazers in various areas of practice, but also locally in whatever media market you're in. Here where I am in Chicago, Crane's Chicago Business, as well as the Chicago Business Journal and the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin, all have their own awards programs for 40 under 40s, most notable attorneys under 40, most notable Gen X law firm leaders, influential women in various professions, so tons and tons of award opportunities. And at a firm level, certainly, firms are making decisions about who they put forward for those awards. But this is something that you as an individual also have an opportunity to keep an eye on and put yourself forward for. And so we'll talk about those in detail in a minute. But, these channels are, again, the social media pieces from a firm perspective. So the firm's LinkedIn page and the firm's Twitter account, if your firm has an Instagram account, these are all things that they're doing messaging from. But there are also obviously individual opportunities on a lot of these platforms too. And so in thinking about self-promotion, we'll think about how you can engage in some of these channels that law firms are using at a law firm level. So what can you do? Well, in terms of speaking engagements, certainly say yes when you're invited. When you're invited to participate in things, I mean, that's a hard lesson sometimes. And we see this particularly, I think, with women, and what we talk about as imposter syndrome, that we don't feel like we are the right expert on a given topic. Whereas if you break it down by gender, we see all kinds of statistics that say that men tend to consider themselves experts, when they've got about 40 to 60% mastery of something, whereas for women it's more like 90+%. So we could all be, a little more willing to say yes to those kinds of opportunities. But we can also think about, in the owned media area, the communications that firms are putting out, the blogs that they're publishing, the newsletters that they're publishing, all the e-blasts that they're pushing out. Are there opportunities for you to be contributing to those? And can you step up and offer to contribute to them in a proactive way based on what you're seeing in your work and in your practice? If your practice group is putting out a newsletter, is there an opportunity to write articles and put yourself forward for that and make sure that your name gets on them? Similarly, if the firm is doing PR and media work and they are looking to put forward firm experts to talk to the media on a particular subject or to write pieces, sometimes there are opportunities that come your way, but sometimes also you can be proactive in finding those opportunities and then pitching them to the firm. And here's where, some of the most valuable allies you can have within the firm, in fact, are not folks in the traditional sort of power structure in terms of practice leaders and office managing partners. So those are certainly helpful allies to have. But the staff folks who are doing the on-the-ground work of business development and marketing are great folks to get to know because they are often the folks who are funneling these kinds of opportunities. Hey, we got an inquiry from a reporter who needs someone who is an expert on prescription drug pricing. Does the firm have anyone who could answer these questions for this reporter? If you are visible and on their radar, that may be an opportunity that comes your way. So those folks are great folks to get to know. And similarly, in outside partnerships that your firm may have in terms of doing sponsorships or participating in community service or pro bono opportunities, if you have direct connections through volunteer work or pro bono work that you're doing, and there are opportunities that come to talk about that in a public-facing way at an event or through the media, then those may be opportunities that head directly to you. And while certainly you may, there may be a firm policy that you need to be cognizant of in terms of asking permission to be quoted in the media, for example, those are things that you can be very proactive about agreeing to and saying yes to. And similarly, of course, you have complete control over your own social media, so your own LinkedIn account and Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, anything else like that you participate in, where you can amplify firm content. Hey, my firm put out this really interesting white paper on this topic, and share it within your network, and share other things that your colleagues are doing in the hopes that they will return the favor. These are channels that on an individual basis are certainly open to firm lawyers. So in thinking about how this would come together in a personal communication strategy, what are some messages that you might have for particular audiences? Well, if you're targeting potential clients in a particular industry, the example here I picked was the food industry, but whoever your targets might be, what's the message that you want them to have about you? Well, you want them to know that you've got some real deep knowledge of their industry and that you're a great cultural fit for working with them, that you've really enjoyed the work that you've had to do in that industry. Maybe you have an earlier background that makes you particularly knowledgeable about the way their businesses run and their operations and their big business concerns. So how can you make sure that the message about what qualifies you uniquely to do that work gets to that audience? Well, what's in the middle column there in terms of media? There are certainly some industry publications like Full Service Restaurant Magazine, Modern Restaurant Magazine. Every trade and industry I find has its own outlets, usually multiples of them. So you can read and engage with those kinds of publications online and look at the opportunities that they have for editorial contributions. And again, this might be something that you need to run past someone at your firm to get permission to do, but you can be pretty proactive about asking for that permission. Maybe there's a firm blog that serves this particular industry, or maybe there should be. Maybe you should initiate starting one. Certainly right now it's hard to find conference and trade show opportunities in the industry, but hopefully at some point it won't be again. And you have the opportunity to show up and talk to people one-on-one and work the room. If you are thinking about an internal audience, and I listed firm leaders here in the second row as a potential audience that you want to communicate with, what are the messages that you want them to have about you? How smart and talented you are, how innovative you are, what potential you have for leadership. Perhaps that you've got fantastic skills for trial work that might not be obvious to them, or that isn't completely known because you did gain that experience through clinics or pro bono work or something that they might not have directly seen. Well, what's the media that will reach those firm leaders? We do know that Law 360 of all the publications is probably best and most widely read among law firm leaders. Bloomberg is probably in second place to that. So certainly, opportunities to write things for their contributed sections, like the expert analysis articles that run in Law 360 or the insights articles that write in Bloomberg, are great opportunities to get in front of that audience. But also your firm may well have an intranet where folks can publish things and share things. Similarly, again, there might be a blog for your firm that you can contribute to. What are the places that you can show off evidence of this message, evidence of your smarts, evidence of your talents that will get in front of this audience? And I won't go through every example here on this worksheet, but this is the kind of work that you can do in just being really thoughtful and planful about who you want to reach and what you want them to know. And the research that goes into this in terms of identifying what's in that middle column, what's in that media section, it is maybe difficult to do on your own. It's probably not fully intuitive for a lot of these. But it's a great question to ask a law firm marketer. And so when I mentioned earlier that some of the great allies that you can have within a law firm are the folks at the staff level who are doing marketing and business development type work, reaching out within a firm to ask one of those folks, hey, I've got some ideas on marketing and communication. And I'd love to, bounce some ideas off of you and talk about them, and, leverage your expertise, help them come up with something great that would benefit the firm and benefit you. That is an awesome use of your time, and they can be tremendously sort of overlooked resources and valuable relationships to have. So if you're struggling with how to fill out a plan like this for yourself, and particularly stuck on that question of what's the media to reach the people that I want to reach, there are some folks who you may be able to email or speed dial quickly, and get a hold of to get answers to that question. Other folks who can help certainly are those kind of outside resources, sponsors, contacts that you have. Now, of course, the in-house folks at your firm will be the ones who'll know any specific policies that you need to be wary of in terms of, can you publish an article with your name on it, or does that need to be run up a certain approval chain within your firm? So they're always going to be an important checkpoint. But clients, will certainly be able to tell you what they read and value as news sources for industry information, so they can help you identify media that you want to make sure that you're part of. And certainly mentors and sponsors and other colleagues may have ideas for opportunities for you. You simply have to ask. And I think it's important to know, as an element of being shameless about this, that you can be upfront about the fact that you want to be doing more to put your skills and knowledge and talents forward, and you're looking for some ideas of how to do that. And, again, in our example of targeting potential client business in the food industry, for example, you can say, I'd really like to be getting a message out there about the work that I could do in this industry. What ideas do you have, or what thoughts do you have on how I might make myself more visible to those kind of folks? Well, that's the balance of the presentation that I wanted to go through. I want to mention that this is a CLE approved webinar, and so I do have a CLE code to make available, and that is SS, as in Social Security, 3997. Again, that CLE code is SS 3997. Beyond that, I am happy to make time available for questions if folks have them. And I know we have some folks from the Safe Arts team and the Belonging Project team who can take your questions and make sure that we take time to discuss them.
And if you want to send us some questions, there is a link, a tab for question and answer. So feel free to send some questions in there. Deborah, we don't have any questions right now in this tab. Sin, do you see any questions that maybe I've missed?
Hi, no, I don't see any coming in yet.
Okay. Well, I have a question for you because, yeah, this is something that comes up. I've seen it more and more in the last maybe 4 to 5 years, where people sort of have interests of their own. They have things that maybe they want to carve out a niche for themselves. Maybe they want to start a blog. And some law firms are more flexible with those things than others. Some law firms are like, hey, you know what? We can't tell you bring your authentic self to work and then try to micromanage these other aspects of yourself, right? And then other firms try to control what you say, when you say it, how you can say it, and all of that. Even to the point, like you alluded to in the presentation, that in some situations, people may have to get somebody else's name on an article before they can get it published. For example, at one of my law firms, if you were a junior attorney, they wanted to have a partner's name on it before you could publish it, even if you did all the work. And so what advice do you have for people in a situation where they may have some ideas, they may have some things they want to do to sort of build out their reputation as a thought leader, but maybe feeling stifled in their organization. What suggestions do you have
Sure.
like that? Yeah.
Sure. And I think you're absolutely right that there's a very broad range of sort of philosophies and approaches to that. We certainly see that with our own client firms. Some firms just simply have a really entrepreneurial culture where folks are kind of encouraged and celebrated to take those kinds of initiatives, and others have a much more conservative traditional culture. And so, certainly it's important to take a moment to try to read the room and see what kind of environment you are in and where it falls on that scale. And certainly internal allies, can be really important. So, unfortunately, it's a reality of life for a lot of associates that you're going to do a lot of work and then see your name, further down on the list, and see the name at the top of the list as someone who didn't make a tremendous content contribution, but at least make sure that your name is on the list. And I find that the associate grapevine is a pretty reliable source for information on who the partners are within the firm who are fair-minded about that, relatively speaking, and those who aren't. So you may need to do a little intelligence gathering about sort of who the right folks to potentially work with are within the framework of your organization. I think the other piece too is that if you are in a firm that has a more conservative culture and is just a little more reticent about folks publishing articles or putting comments forward when they're more junior, then that's when some of these other media opportunities make sense and have real value. What you put on your own LinkedIn, for example, and LinkedIn has really developed as a platform that is essentially a personal publishing platform. And you can do an article on LinkedIn that looks very much, like a professionally published blog post. So you can take advantage of the channels that you can control and that you don't need permission for, and work that way. And similarly, if you're involved, for example, in professional organizations or a bar association committee, and they're doing work where they're putting publications out or putting seminars forward, and you can do stuff with them that has your name on it through that organization, and there's an easier permission structure to work through there, then that's probably a valuable use of your time.
Deb, we do have one question that came in. What is the best way to establish those mentorship relationships with partners who may have so many people trying to connect with them? What makes them feel as if taking you as a mentee is worth their time?
Oh, that's such a great question. That's such a smart question. Well, the person who has that insight already has a leg up, I think, on a lot of us, because that's such a great way to think about it. That, these relationships are not entirely altruistic on the part of the partners. They are, in some cases, in many cases, they're trying to bet on the right horse, right? They're trying to pick the folks who they think have the most, potential for advancement, so that they are pouring their valuable time and attention, into someone who they think is committed to staying and likely to succeed. So I think, being upfront and specific about particular ambitions or goals that you have, so that you can have a fairly honest conversation about alignment, right? That what you're looking to do and the kind of work that you're looking to do, the kind of clients that you're looking to engage with, the kind of role that you would like to play within the firm, fits with the kinds of things that particular partner does. And certainly, I mean, there are partners who are super focused on being rainmakers and are fantastic business developers. And if that's your bent, then those are the folks that you want to get to know. But, there are also partners who are, tremendous managers, tremendous trial lawyers, who have different sets of expertise. And if they're more in line with what you're looking for, they're more likely to be willing to take you under their wing if it's clear that you want the same things and are interested in the same things. So sometimes the sort of marquee partner, who everybody wants to get in front of, is not the right fit and not the right choice for you anyway, because their particular strength or their particular focus of their career really isn't aligned with what you want to be doing anyway. So that's one where it pays to be kind of careful and strategic, but also pretty transparent, about what it is exactly that you're looking for. And so, I find there are some partners who are certainly very interested in mentee relationships. If, for example, they can be a partnership where they've got someone who's interested in doing a lot of writing, and they can share bylines on things, and that's something that they'd like to, have someone to be able to help them with, then it could be mutually beneficial.
Well, we've come upon our time. I have more questions, but it's 3:01 Central Time, and we are done. And Deborah, I want to say thank you very much for offering up your time, your talent, and doing what you can to support diverse lawyers and law students during this pandemic. We appreciate you. To those who are listening and who want to listen to this again, the recording will be on demand on the Belonging Project website, probably within the next 2 days. And Deborah's contact information is on the slide right now if you want to stay in touch with her or ask her additional questions. Let's see, something else just popped on my screen. And, it was just somebody saying thank you. All right, well, thank you very much, and we will see you next time. All right, thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.